from the top. All right. So the quick thing and that I changed this week, I'll just do a brief recap. The syllabus got updated once again. So if you go out to this week, I just moved mini project 3 down to next week because it makes more sense to do a project on Flask than it does on Streamlit, because most of your projects are going to be Flask or Django. Okay. If you're going to end up doing some big data project or data science project for your final concentration down here, like for example, you're a computer science, that would probably make the most sense. Or if you're doing, if you are trying to be doing data concentrations within informatics, then we can definitely get you to use something like Streamlit. It makes more sense that way. But you may still want to do that if you're doing something in cybersecurity, but you're more focused on data and you're trying to crunch out a bunch of numbers or show statistics or graphs or stuff like that. There again, Streamlit makes more sense. You can do the same things in Flask and Django. It just takes more to code those particular things. However, if you want to build a full-fledged website or an application, which we'll get into, Flask and Django are much bigger in that. But Streamlit itself allows you to build these real quick data scripts into shareable web apps with real quick. Then the next thing I was covering there, one before the recording, was let's see, we were talking about Streamlit. What else were we talking about? Oh, yes. If you noticed in the announcements, there was a way to fix a couple things. So first of all, if you use matplotlib 352, which if you come to your packages like this one, I have 3.6 installed, you'll want to delete that package. And then when you come back, it's going to say latest right here. Click on latest and change that to 352 and then install that. And that should get rid of any of the errors you get when you were trying to run the code. So probable errors, like if I run this here, I think I get the same error. Should anyway. Yes. So if you're getting this backend interag figure canvas ag error, this is due to matplotlib 3.6 along with Python 3.10 along with PyCharm. It's a combination of all three of those. It's an issue. It's a issue that's been submitted to Matplotlib, and they're still working on getting a fix. But for now, if you just back rev back to 3.5.2, everything works fine. There is a way that you can get it to work in 3.6, but you have to go edit a bunch of settings files and configuration files. This is a much faster, easier way to fix that issue. All right. Another way to deal with this is all with pip install, and many of you are having issues with pip. If you come up here to Files, Settings, Tools, and Terminal, by default, the PyCharm now uses PowerShell, and that's the reason I was having issues, and I was like, this always works for me. It's because now they use PowerShell by default. So if you go in here and change this to the command prompt, hit apply and OK, and then reboot PyCharm, the next time you come into the terminal, you should see this VENV at the front. If you see that, that means you're in your virtual environment, right? So now that means I could do pip install whatever I need to install. If I do a pip freeze, I should get the output of every package that I have installed, which you see on the screen there. And then real nice, if I go to pip freeze greater than requirements.txt, it will automatically dump all this contents into a requirement.txt, and I don't have to build that by scratch. So it's real slick. Once you actually get pip working like it's supposed to, you can easily run this command. So right before you guys submit your homework assignments, or in this case, the projects, I encourage you just to run this command one last time. That way, if any of your packages changed, all of that's up to date. No, once you change that setting, it should do it for PyCharm in general. Yep. Now, there's ways to get the PowerShell stuff to work. The only way you really get it to work, though, is to lower a bunch of security parameters and permissions and things like that. Obviously, being a cyber guy, I'm not going to force you guys to do that just to run a bunch of, you know, unassigned scripts. And we have a very strong PowerShell user, Mr. Sam, and I think Sam would frown at me if I suggested to everybody to turn off the sign execution parameters of PowerShell just to run these little activation scripts. Right, Sam?
You can do a bypass per command, but we'll not.
Yeah, I saw the bypass command, and then you can kind of do that on every startup. That was one option. And then I was like, if we just go back to the command prompt, we don't have to deal with any of that. So again, you guys are free to fix PowerShell. You're free to use the command prompt, whatever. I tried to pick the easiest one for most of the people in the class to go after. Okay. So that takes us to Streamlit. Again, there's no project this week, but I do encourage you to do some kind of project. It just won't be something that we grade. Does that make sense? So for today, what I'm going to do is just kind of take you through Streamlit and all the different options and things that you guys can go through. And then on Thursday, we won't necessarily meet in class here. I want you guys to go play with Streamlit, right? Just go play. You don't necessarily have to build out a project and submit it. If you want to build out a project on your GitHub and have me take a look at it, I'm perfectly happy to do that. I'm just not going to enforce you guys to have a grade for it, right? But I will encourage you to do the project. I don't know how to say that. Basically do the project. I'm just not going to grade it for you. But your experience in it is going to help you dramatically if you're going to do a data science project. I would love to add just another project to the class and make you guys do it, but I already set that in the syllabus and I don't want to mess with everybody's grade. It's one thing to move schedule around in the grade. It's another thing to mess with your guys' grade. I don't like doing that. Anybody have any questions or problems with not having a project kind of thing? Again, I'm not requiring you to do it, but it's in your best interest to go through and do it. But that also means on Thursday, then we won't physically meet in here unless you guys want to meet in here and go through a bunch of APIs or Streamlit or go in deeper. So I'll let you guys decide that by the end of class. All right.
I know when we get into about
hiring 600 and stuff like that, I like to give you guys plenty of time to work in the classroom, but not sit here and listen to me lecture the whole time, right? You guys need time to do that. You've got 12 other classes you got to get through the weekend. So. What's that? Oh, somebody mentioned.
I have a quick question about pip freeze.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if you can go back to PyCharm.
Yeah.
A lot of those packages aren't being used by our current project. That's most of it is stuff that's just pre-installed with Python, right? We're not using Pillow in this or anything. Is there a way to shave that down or?
No, so these are all requirements from the other one. So really all the packages I installed was probably NumPy, Pandas, and Matplotlib. Pillow is being used because Pillow is what generates graphics coming out of Matplotlib. So Pillow is a package that particularly deals with images and being able to resize images and do a bunch of stuff with graphics. That's the reason this list is way bigger than what you just minimally installed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay. So all of those are being used just under the hood maybe or something?
Exactly right. Yep.
Okay.
So NumPy itself actually has 5 packages, 6 packages that are dependencies under the hood.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Did anybody have any troubles with last week's project? I know I asked that, but the mic was off, so I'll ask again. If I know some of you guys sent me some emails over the weekend, I had a big group of students that I took to Kansas City this weekend for a security conference. And so I'm trying to get caught back up on email. So I apologize if I haven't got your email. Just know I'm getting there. I just haven't got there yet. And yesterday was a long day of meetings trying to get caught up with everybody on campus. As always, if you guys are feeling like you're not going to meet the Sunday deadline, just shoot me an email. You can automatically assume that your deadline's extended. Just shoot me an email and say, hey, I need more time. Something's not working right, especially in those first couple projects where we were having PyCharm issues. Deadlines mean nothing to me as much as you guys learning the stuff, right? I could care less about deadlines. You have the rest of your life to worry about deadlines. So, all right. So I'm going to fire up a new project here just so we can play with Streamlit. And so we got this. We're going to change the project. Streamlit example. Which is a great point that you were bringing up there. So the packages that are installed by Python by default, really all you should see is pip and what's called setup tools. And setup tools is a portion of pip. It's the package installer there. So we'll confirm that here on this new project here. So we'll let this do its thing. And there are some other tweaks we can do in PyCharm, like if your computer's taking forever to index for whatever reason, right? We'll see that sometimes down here at the bottom where it's scanning through everything. There are some tweaks where we can turn off the level of indexing and things like that if you have a slower computer. However, I have seen in the newer versions of PyCharm, even if you have a really fast machine, which I believe your name's escaping me down there, bud. Yeah. I was working on his laptop and he's got a really powerful laptop, but PyCharm was just crawling for whatever reason. So I think part of that's to do with PyCharm right now and just the way it's indexing. Obviously, the faster the hard drive you have, preferably an SSD, preferably an NVMe style drive, that's going to go a whole lot faster. But I'm not telling you have to go buy specialized laptops and all that kind of stuff. The reason for that, and if you find that PyCharm is too heavy in that regard, there's plenty of other text editors. I know you were still having issues with Visual Studio doing the same thing. And what it's doing during that indexing is when you start typing and it tries to autofill for you, that does that because it indexed your entire project. So if you just let it do its indexing, then from there on out, it's not that big a deal. Okay. So if we go down to Python packages, you'll see that by default, all that's installed is wheel, pip, and setup tools. And if we go to the terminal, again, we should see this V and V over here. And if we do a pip freeze, by default, you won't even see anything pop up, right? Because those three basic packages are always installed with Python. So if we're dealing with Streamlit, I'm going to bring this up in a different window here. Okay. So you can watch this little video in here. It does a good demonstration of how you can actually get code up and running really, really fast. So it's as simple as importing Streamlit as ST, doing st.write. You write this in the quotes and boom, up pops a website. It's really that simple. If you're dealing with models, you can put in models and then you write a bunch of different data out. It automatically generates the graph and things for you. So it's really, really simple to run. There's a bunch of different projects already out here, and that's kind of what we're going to explore today. So to get started, we're just going to need to do a pip install Streamlit, which now that we have pip working like it's supposed to down here, we're going to do it this way. Now, for example, you're going to see a whole lot of extra packages installed besides just Streamlit here. So we'll let that get all fired up. So as you can see on the screen, there's like a ton of different packages that had as requirements, one of them being NumPy, and then NumPy obviously requires a bunch of other ones inside of it. You're going to have Jenga. We're going to talk about Jenga templates and how those work. With this one's using pandas. It's also using, what was the other one I want to point out? Pillow is how you're going to build our graphics, request server. And this, I believe, is using Tornado. Yeah, it uses Tornado for the web service. You'll have to forgive my nose. I left my windows open and forgot that the farmers were harvesting. So my allergies have gone through the roof.
Same here behind the muted mic.
It's been really nice, cold, fresh air outside, but I didn't realize, I thought harvest was over. Excuse me. Thought harvest was over. And so. All right, let's get these packages and stuff. Okay. And so as the documentation says, if we do a Streamlit hello, that's going to run a simple hello world. So Streamlit hello. So Streamlit, you run that in place of doing Python, blah, 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 right? And that's going to set everything up. So in Streamlit here, you can go through and set up this initial setup. This is if you want to get updates from Streamlit and stuff like that. You're not required to do it. So we're just going to leave it blank. And it's going to gather some statistics. It is going to try to open up a port. So you're going to have to allow that inside of there. That port is just so that you can run a local web app, right? So if we allow access, by default, it sets it up on your local host running on port 8501, right? So once that's up, you can click on, like, say, these different demos, excuse me, these different demos over here on the left. And then over here in the middle, you can see like this one's doing a fractal, animated fractal based on the kind of a Julio set, and you can adjust these different details. Plotting is a pretty common one here. So if we look at the plotting demo, this one's going to show you a bunch of graphs. And in this case, it's kind of doing it over time. So it's just doing random numbers over 5 seconds. If we look at the code, you can actually pull this code out. Notice that it's only like, what, 30 lines? It's very, very minimal code to run Streamlit stuff. The one that would be of interest to us right now, because of what you guys have been dealing with, is the DataFrame demo. So in this one allows you to choose different countries. So you can see where we have drop downs. So we can build drop downs of different data sets. If you can think of the different tabs that you may have had in your pandas frame. So like, for example, when we pulled the stock information, we had closing, open, that kind of stuff. We can adjust those different downticks, and then we can do some statistical information like what you see here, which is just drawing a pandas frame straight on the screen, which allows us to adjust and slide that over. We can also blow this up, and then we can see all the data at once, and we can adjust back and forth inside there as well. If we go back, click on the little up there, we can see this graph that'll go ahead and code this portion of it out. Now, that entire little project is just this many lines. It's super, super small in the lines. So what we're going to do is just copy this code so we can see what it looks like. And we'll go back out here. We're going to overwrite our main.py. And so in this case, it's going to use a couple extra handlers, like trying to cache the data and things like that. We're not going to go into great detail there. But the idea is that it's going to try to go gather all this information. And if it doesn't work, it's just going to print out an error to the screen saying that we need internet access, right? So if you're trying to run this on a virtual machine that doesn't have internet access, it's because the data isn't on the screen, or the data is included with the project. We're actually going out to an API and pulling it. So in this case, it goes out to this AWS bucket. It's going to pull in a CSV file that's out there. Notice that we're using pandas PD read underscore CSV. That's going to allow us to pull that in. Then it's going to return that data index coming out. On the countries, we're going to use what's called a multi-select, and then we just pass it a list of the different countries that we are going to allow it to pull out. Notice in order to do that, it's just pulling the data frame index. If you guys remember, we had dataframe.describe and the things like that that would pull stats back. If you do .index, it's going to pull a list of all the indexes coming back. And then you have to populate that with the titles that you want in. So in this case, China and the United States is already selected for us. Does that make sense? So here is the name of the multi-select. This is the list of options. This is the ones that are already selected for us. Okay. If we try to select something in the list that for whatever reason doesn't show up, we pop out an error. Otherwise, we're going to use our data frame as our countries. We divide that by whatever it is, and then we can index and write that code out. So super simple to write code out inside of here. All right. Again, there's tons of different demos out here on Streamlit itself. So if you come out to Streamlit and you look at some different applications, for example, this one is going to use our pandas inside of here. We write out hello world. Notice that because we have this inside of a hashtag, it does it as a header. And so there's a whole templating language for Streamlit. If you wrap that in asterisks, like you see here, you're going to see world is italicized. And then you have that. Then at that point, we simply have our data frame. In this case, we're going to read in a CSV file, say that we want to use a line chart and spit out the data frame. It will automatically adjust all that stuff that you guys have been doing in Matplotlib, does it all for you. You don't have to adjust it. You don't have to tell it what you want. You can in great detail, but it's always easiest just to use Streamlit right off the bat and show what's going on. You can use advanced web applications like this, where we actually have a number slider that will adjust the different charts. You can drag and drop files, pick colors, radio buttons, pick dates in order to do the different data that's inside of there. All right. If you post this out to your GitHub, right, and then you point that over to Streamlit, it will automatically deploy your code for you so that you don't have to run a web server. So Streamlit actually hosts its own web server. All you have to do is point your GitHub URL to it. It will go pull your code from your GitHub and automatically deploy it and run it on the internet so that you can pull the information back. And that's kind of the beauty behind Streamlit, is it's written in a way that does that. So as a community, you write really small web applications that are just trying to show you some data, and then you share that GitHub URL with everybody else. It automatically deploys so they can see what's going on, right? That way I don't have to check out the code, run a local web server, do all that kind of stuff. It's all built in with GitHub. So if you come over here in this powerful web apps, you can see a bunch of different categories over here. And so Streamlit templates, there's some great ones to get in here and play with. For example, if you want to build a PDF generator, now this is building diplomas, right? But the idea is that you could tweak this and build out whatever you wanted it to build out, right? So right now it's going ahead, checking out the code, building out a Streamlit app, and then deploying that code for me to interact with. That. Okay, so we have this little template over here. It's basically generating an image. At this point, we can put in a name like Jason Zeller. We can see where that's getting put in under the student section. We can choose the name of the course. We'll choose something like advanced cryptography, whatever grade I passed with, and generate a PDF document. They have a cute little animation that pops up there. We can click on the download PDF. And if we look at that PDF, we can see that it shows my name in there, has the advanced cryptography and the score coming in. So where would that be handy? Well, obviously not so much for certificate of completions, but think about it with your data science project. If you want them to be able to print off a PDF document of a bunch of different information, you could have the fill-in boxes over here. You generate a template of all that data science information to come out and be displayed out. They can just select what graphs they want, all that kind of stuff. So it's a really simple project, but it's kind of powerful in how you may want to use that inside your application. Let me go back here to Streamlit, if it will let me. Okay. So there's a bunch of them out here. I just encourage you to go out and explore those. What we're going to care about is coming out here to the gallery. That's going to show you basically those where they're examples of things that people have done. You can click on this and get the application, or you can click on view source code, which will kick you out to the GitHub for that. All right. Excuse my nose here. I'm going to go do that. Different components. So this is different things that you can shove inside your graphs. For the virtualization side, you can do different styles of graphs, 3D ones. You can mark out on like Google Maps and do different plots. So it all depends on what your data is as to how you can best represent that graphic going forward. There's several different widgets. So you can use things like a cropper widget, which is going to allow you to crop down images on your website. So if you need to build a bunch of different images out, you can use that inside of there. Bunch of different ones out here. I'll let you do that. But what we care about is the docs, right? We got to figure out how to get started. So I'm gonna let this pull up. I'm gonna blow my nose here real quick. Sorry. All right, so if we get started over here on the left, that's going to tell us how to get everything installed, which I think we do. We can go ahead and create an app. And if we look through here, this one's going to show us how to set up a website for, in this case, Uber pickups. and then you can see that it's going to pop up. Then it's going to go ahead and fetch the data real time as to where the pickups and drop-offs are in New York. So in this case, it's going to use some Amazon template data that's in a CSV. In this load data, you can see that we read in this one, but this time we're going to tell it specifically how many number of rows we want to pull in, that we're going to convert everything to lowercase so we can adjust the type of data that's on there. We can rename things, columns, and we can adjust the data. So it's kind of slick as how you can do that. If you want to do caching of your data, this is what I was talking about before. So you put this decorator on here of @st.cache before you actually load data into something specific. Then when you save that, every time you pull it, it's going to pull from cache. That way you don't have to go out to the internet and do a bunch of calls. This is handy if you're doing a bunch of API calls. If you guys remember when we talked about API ninjas, that we were just racking up the API count, which isn't a big deal because you got like 1 million requests. But if you are using an API where you have to pay to get that information, you probably want to cache that data at some point. All right. So you can use that. There's a way to show you how to use multi-page apps. So if you want to go through multiple pages and not just a single page, you can do that here as well. So what I want you to do is just kind of go out and play with this. This cheat sheet is really handy. I use it the last couple projects I've done. So from the command line, this shows you things that you can do. So for example, it's Streamlit, run, and then whatever the name of your Python file is that actually launches the website for you. Hello is going to show the example. You can check out your config. If you want to clear your cache, it's Streamlit cache clear. All of these would get executed inside your terminal here, right? So I currently have this up and running. If I hit Control D, or is it going to be C? It's going to be C inside this prompt. So Control C will stop that web application from running. And then if I do like Streamlit cache, was it clear cache or cache clear? Cache clear. Yeah, I was right. It would go through and just kind of clear all the cache, which obviously I don't have any data that's going to go through and pull there. If you want to check out your version, the docs is also handy. So if you go to Streamlit docs, if I remember, this will actually build the documentation locally and kick you out in the browser. So it kicks you out to the docs. So you don't have to go out and find the website. You just type Streamlit docs. It kicks you out to documentation. So really slick and stuff that I've used inside of there. Let me go back to that cheat sheet because that's really handy. Okay. Let's see. So they're going to talk about magic commands. And what magic's going to do is pretty much you have st write, and whenever you pass an st write, it's going to try to figure out what you're doing and automatically display that on the screen the way you want it. So for example, if you use Markdown, which is what we use, right? We paste this in there, we throw in a variable, we tell it it's a data frame, and then tell it what data frame we're going to print. It will automatically create the right graphs and everything else that's going inside of there. If you want to add more information to it, well, then you just use these interactive widgets on the inside. So for example, a lot of what you'll write is st write, and then you can pass in your data frame. You can pass in errors, functions, things like that. We saw that in this code here. So for example, if we say st error, and then we format the reason that we want the error here, then that's coming in as URL-E. So instead of it just saying URL error on the screen, we can customize the type of URLs or the errors that pop up. So we can tell them why it's wrong and what's going wrong. You can also use xt or st write, or sorry, text. Text will give you fixed link text. If you want to specifically pass in Markdown, you can use that. If you're somebody that likes to write in LaTeX, does anybody know what LaTeX is or doesn't know what LaTeX is? Okay, so LaTeX is a common way of writing documentation. Markdown is one of the big ones. LaTeX has been around for a very long period of time, right? So if you guys have ever gone through and looked at the docs for most Linux tools, those are typically written in LaTeX. So if you come up here and type in LaTeX documentation, it's usually spelled differently, like that. And so again, it's just a way of writing documentation. from latex. It's a way that you can format different projects and show different things out there. It's been around for a very, very long period of time. So if you need to know more, you can go pull that out. Let's see, title, header, and subheader. These are ones that you guys will use the most. If you want to ever write code on the screen, you can use st.code. So it's really intuitive as to what you're going to be writing on there. I encourage you to either print this cheat sheet off or have it in a quick documentation area so that you can pull it out. What's really handy is this interactive slide. So you can do ST button checkboxes, multi-selects, different things going inside of there. If you want to optimize performance, obviously use the cache. We talked about that. What else is important that I've used in here? Displaying data. You can just pass the data frame directly in. If you had a table or if you had a bunch of, excuse me, JSON, you could just pass the whole JSON dump right inside of there and to have it displayed on the screen. It will automatically figure out how it's going to display it. If you're doing images, it's as simple as saying st.image and then going through. So if you've ever done this stuff in Python, which most of you haven't yet, but if you're building this in, say, Flask and Django that we're getting ready to go through, there's a whole lot more setup you got to do for that. You can't just say blah, blah, dot image and then point to an image. It doesn't work like that. So really strict, really slick way of building web applications really fast. Okay. But what I want to show, let me grab this URL. Let's see here. I just haven't got a chance to post this in the, I'll pause this record. Okay. So this particular YouTube channel, and again, I'll post this out on Blackboard. As a matter of fact, let me just do that now before I forget. Let's see, web link. Ah, come on. Okay, so there's the part-time YouTube library or YouTube channel rather. Where did I put that at now? And we'll just click on it again. So when I was getting into stock information and trying to build my own applications and do a lot of things with Python, I found this YouTube channel extremely helpful in doing that. And so he's going to take you through a bunch of different ways of doing data crunching, stock information, that kind of stuff. But his Streamlit apps is what turned me on to Streamlit. And then I since used it in a bunch of different other projects. But if this first one here, which is where he's building financial dashboards, security incidents, all right, we're going to turn that way down. All right, so he's going to walk you through doing a bunch of Streamlit stuff. And so he's going to kind of walk you through how to set this up, how to build it out. But at the end, what really happens is he builds this website that shows you the stock charts. And then you get to select which dashboard you want. So if you want to see specific patterns, if you want to see different stocks, and you can pull this information, really great way of building your own dashboard. So I was telling you in the very beginning when I built a dashboard out that had a bunch of all the stocks I was tracing, but I also had like 4 different stockbrokers. So I had Fidelity, I used Robinhood, I used Alpaca, and what was my other one? Nope, didn't use Weebly. I used another big popular one. Thinkorswim was the other one I used, which is a derivative of some big company. I can't remember. Anyway, I had all these spread out. And so why did I do that? This is financial stuff, not necessarily Python, but it ties back. Is I found out when I started out with my Robinhood account, right? Because that was the easiest one for me to get started on. Went there, great. And then Robinhood crashed. Right on the biggest day that we were doing the most amount of trading, there was massive crashes all over Robinhood. So all my money was tied up in Robinhood. I didn't have other brokers. Therefore, I couldn't trade. I couldn't make any money. It was stuck. So I took about half the money that I had invested in Robinhood and broke it out to these other brokers so that if any one broker went down, I could still trade with some other broker inside of there. But that's where I started doing more Python in order to do auto trading. and just building out how to build my own scripts to do that kind of stuff out of there. So Streamlit, or this guy, what he allowed me to do was build a website that it would immediately allow me to be a screener for these different things. But if you also look through here, I mentioned to you guys that we built one out with Wall Street Bets. So if you do a search here for Wall Street Bets, and he's going to show you how to track things with Wall Street Bets, and he used Python in order to do this. But you can also do the same thing with Streamlit, and use Python for that. He used a SQL database to store all that stuff in. In this case, we built a SQL database, but then we shoved that out to Streamlit, so we had a front end for it. So again, trying to figure out how to use time series data. We talked about that with pandas frames and things like that. If you want good examples, something that's relevant to you, I encourage you to go out and look through a couple of his videos and actually follow along with them. They're really, really good. I'm not going to pretend it's my information and show it to you guys. Like, this is where I learned to build Streamlit stuff. And then I took that information and made a whole bunch of other projects on the side of that. Okay. So if you guys are interested in doing stocks and things like that, I encourage you to go out and build this one here. He's using, I think, Interactive Brokers to gather the information, but you can pull it from wherever. For example, you can pull almost everything through Y Finance. You can use the same Yahoo Finance package we were using. But what I wanted to show was building out very simple code like he has here. You'll see that he's just building out some dictionary. He has pandas. Here it's just generating a big frame. So he's kind of explaining how this works. Again, I could do this and claim it was my own, but I encourage you to go watch this video. So, but you'll find out just how easy it is to make drop downs down over here, how easily it is to make sliders that make sense when you're adjusting different things. And then you can pass that graph up so you can see candle charts going through there. Anybody have any questions on the whole thing? Now, with that being said, does anybody have any particular project where they are intending to do data science stuff for the final project? I know most of you haven't thought about your final project yet, so that's fine, but I plan to throw the information up for the final project here. I was intending to do that after Django so that you guys would see the requirements. What I didn't want you to do is start immediately working on your final project and then realize that there's a whole bunch of new set of requirements that you didn't understand. So I didn't want to post that stuff till after the most of the course was done. But you guys have a lot of time to work on your final projects, right? So if we go back and refresh, this entire last 4 weeks, 5 weeks is all based on your final project. All right. There is no final exam or anything like that. It's all baked into your final project. And there is a whole rubric for undergrad and for graduate on this final project. So you'll be able to see exactly the breakdown of how this is going to get graded. It's way more detailed than INF601's rubric for the final project. This one's way, way, way more sophisticated, I guess. I could show you what it looks like here. So on the undergraduate specific, you have this chart here. And so you'll have this criteria for like modularization and generalization. And then you have these different points that you would get. So up to 10 points, right? Going through there. So in this case, the program is broken into well thought out elements that are appropriate length, scope, and independence. Individual elements are written in a way that it actively invites reuse in other projects. In other words, you wrote a project that I could then go, okay, that's cool, but I could also use your same code to build something else, right? Or if you're just emerging and getting the 0 to 2 section, you have little to no code elements and the code is not written for reuse at all. Like there's nothing I can reuse out of your code kind of thing. It's mostly, are you doing it clean? Are you not doing it clean? That kind of stuff. But this is the undergrad one. Now the graduate one is much more detailed. And so most of this spit out is the same, but you have a whole nother section down here. Actually, both of them have that. As to the user interface, project management, code's on GitHub, code's not on GitHub, right? So if you post everything on GitHub and it's easy for me to check it out, you use proper use of commits and you have branches and things like that, which in this case, in your final project, you have to use branches in order to get the 8 to 10 points. But if you don't use branches, you would get up to 7 points, right? Which makes sense. You get your master one, then you start deving everything else inside of that. So we'll go through all this when we get to the final project. That's the reason I don't want to scare you this early. I just want to make sure you guys have access to it. All right. Anybody online have any questions on Streamlit about this week?
No questions.
So like when you want to see like your AP thing, your code run, and then it goes into the website, is it automatically on the like Chrome, and then every time you like commit and push, does it automatically update, or how is that?
You have to build that tie. So initially, when you're building in your code like this one here, you just come down here at the bottom and type in Streamlit, whatever the name of your py. So like this is main.py, right? And that will go ahead and launch it locally. So it will launch it in a website. You'll see it. Oh, that's where I'm messing up. Streamlit run main.py. There you go. And so this will give you a URL, and then of course it'll pop up in whatever your default browser is. Once you get all this code posted out to GitHub, then you can go out to Streamlit, and it's part of the Streamlit cloud. And so you have to sign up for your Streamlit, log into your account, then you connect your Streamlit cloud with your GitHub, and then anytime you go to that, you can kick it up and run it. We don't necessarily have to do it for class, but if you want to tie it in and do it, you can. Yep. Like I said, there's no project this week. I just want you to go out and kind of look at these different apps and applications, see if this may be a fit for your content one, right? So if we go back and look at the syllabus as to when you guys are working with that, at some point, the first thing we do is kind of build an outline for your project. Then we explore what API that you're going to be using or how you're going to gather your data. On week 14, we select your framework. And if you decide that Streamlit makes the most sense for you, then we'll work together in order to figure out how to make Streamlit work the best, kind of thing, right? Same way with Django and Flask. When you guys select those as your framework, then I go on ahead and make examples of that. So if you pick something that we have to do in Flask, right, and you got to do something fancy in Flask, well, then I'll demo that to the whole class so everybody can see how you do that in Flask. I'm going to try that model that tends to work the best, at least based on history, but because I can show you a bunch of examples, but until it's relevant to your project, then it's much easier to show it and then everybody understands it. All right. If nobody has any questions, again, we won't meet Thursday. What I want you to do on Thursday is just play with Streamlit. Or do you guys want to meet in here on Thursday and play with Streamlit? I'm leaving it up to the class. Does anybody want to go through any particular examples on Thursday? You want me to leave the option open? Okay. So on Thursday, what we'll do is we'll plan on those that want to meet. You can meet here. We're just going to run through some Streamlit examples. So we'll build out we'll think of some project, whether it's stock tickers or something like that. We may even just walk through Larry's example on how he builds out the Streamlit stuff, because that is pretty useful on showing you the different things that you can add in there. Okay. All right. Stop the recording.